What's shaking there, gentlemen? Decided I'm gonna switch some gears here for this video. This weekend I was binging on some Akira Kurosawa flicks, which for those of you that know who he is, Japanese filmmaker, um, very much so a has a cult following, Japanese guy. He did the Seven Samurai, which was remade into uh, uh, the Magnificent Seven. He also did the original for a few dollars more with Clint Eastwood. He did a Japanese version that for a few dollars more was a remake of, and for a fistful of dollars was a remake of Yojimbo. And then there's another one called Sanjuro, which is for a few dollars more. It's a remake. Um, but I watched he made movies all the way into the 90s until he died in 98, but he also made movies during World War II, wartime Japan, and I think pre-war too. But I watched a couple of his movies from the 80s, and actually Star Wars was based off of one of his movies as well, called I think the Impenetrable Fortress or something, the Hidden Fortress, something like that. But Star Wars was based off. Anyway, I binged it. I watched. There was one called Kagemusha, and then one called Ran. Kagemusha was they were both warlord movies, feudal Japan, with their warlord armies and stuff. But both one was made in '85, one I think was '80. One of them was based on King Lear by Shakespeare. Those were most excellent, and the it was also in color, and the visual effects were a little bit cooler, a little bit more dramatic, like almost like a play, especially the one that was like done after King Lear. But the ones that really struck me, don't get me wrong, the new ones were most excellent, but I didn't watch Seven Samurai. It's a very long movie. It's like a 3.5 hour movie. But that's one of my all-time favorite movies. It really is an amazing piece of cinematography, amazing film. I mean, I think it's in the top 10. Not before I say that, actually, this movie Yojimbo, which is for a fistful of dollars, and then Sanjuro. These two movies are probably in the top five best movies that I've watched in years. In years. I was absolutely glued to these movies. Um, and they were just fantastic. I mean, they were actually, I would say they were at least as good as Seven Samurai, possibly better. The writing was so on point. This guy has amazing directing skills. I mean, and his photographer is amazing. The shots, I mean, they were the way that I started thinking of it towards the end. What really grabbed me about these movies, they reminded me of Quentin Tarantino when he was doing Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. They were low budget films, but the writing and the acting was so on point, and the casting was so perfect that you didn't need crazy special effects. You didn't need all that stuff because the scenes were perfectly acted. They had perfect dialogue. So you didn't need all the CGI. You didn't need big explosions. And the music of those movies was fantastic. That's another thing about these Yojimbo, even Seven Samurai, Yojimbo, and Sanjuro, which Yojimbo and Sanjuro are loosely ones. They're the main character, the protagonist is the same character, but these movies have a very almost that grittiness that Pulp Fiction had and Reservoir Dogs had, because these were made in the 50s, like the late 50s, early 60s, and these Japanese. I mean, you don't even realize that it's in Japanese because the dialogue is so excellent, so excellent. Not only that, but it's so, the imagery of these movies is amazing. Japan was so beautiful. And not only that, but you can see that our landscaping here in America is 100% based on Japan. Almost every single landscaping plant in America is a Japanese native plant. I used to do landscaping and I know them all. And there's a couple that are Chinese, but like juniper and stuff, those are all Japanese. And it's weird because they did landscaping like we do landscaping in the 1600s. Like, it's kind of crazy, and it gives you a bit of a peek into that. And also, it gives you a bit of a peek into the way people used to comport themselves years ago, and the way that their society was set up. And I just I just couldn't get over how good. I mean, there were the fight scenes were epic, were just awesome, explosive fight scenes. And when there were conflicts, like especially when it was him versus a gang, it would be like him with wind and dust, like the whole lone gunfighter western thing. And that's very much so, I think, a Japanese thing, with the samurai in the field in the wind, two samurai duking it out. And that's definitely, I mean, it was amazing. Some of these scenes of him just, slowly approaching, 20 guys in the middle of a main street, and just like a total badass. And it's funny because, you can see how different that culture is, but also appealing. It's very appealing. I would gladly go back and live in feudal Japan. It wasn't I don't think it was a extremely brutal society. They had very excellent social, the social mores and the fabric of society was very well done. But I just can't get over how good those movies were. I always, Seven Samurai. I watched that movie when I was a kid. I remember my dad watching it, on a Saturday, and I just, sat down and watched, and it was awesome. It was an amazing movie. And so are these other two, like I said, Yojimbo, Yojimbo, and Sanjuro, Sanjuro. And it kind of reminds me of those spaghetti western films, how gritty they were, how everybody's dirty, raunchy. They're not like the old John Wayne movies where everybody has a perfectly clean, you know, uh, clothes on, and they, you know what I mean, with the ascot and stuff. No, it reminded me of spaghetti westerns. Very, very realistic. Um, Especially, the special effects are nothing too crazy, but they're very realistic. And the environment itself, the Japanese environment is almost a character in itself because it's so beautiful the way the structures are, and I love how these stories take place in villages, little hamlets, that maybe 100 people live in, 200 people at the most, 20 families, 30 families, and these big storylines take place in these little villages. And it's funny because when the westerns redo them, they end up using the whole West practically to tell the story. Whereas these are very much so an local, and he some of the some of the some of the things that he's questioning, some of the ideas that are on display and being questioned, morality and stuff like that, and individualism, um, are are just awesome. They're very he tells a story in a very efficient and gripping fashion. Uh, and it's funny too because the character, just much like in the spaghetti westerns with Clint Eastwood, he doesn't really fit in. Clint Eastwood didn't really fit in. He was everybody else was very high strung, and he's just kind of lackadaisical, not a care in the world. Everybody's rushing. He's taking his time, not worried. And that's it's funny because in these movies, that's how the protagonist is. I think he's somewhat of an outcast because, Japanese, the social cues, the bowing, the constant, everything is so structured. And he's the opposite. He's like, scratching his head, what just doing kind of boorish, not boorish behavior, but behavior that they see as eccentric. He's not doing all the bowing and this and that. But he also, he helps people. It's weird because, he kind of, it seems like he's just, kind of a bounty guy just looking to make a buck, but he does things that show that obviously he's operating on a level of morale, on a moral level. Anyway, I watched these movies this weekend, and I just could not help myself. I had to jump on here and recommend them to you guys because they're fantastic. And I'm probably going to do a video on both of them this week where I'm going to use stills and see if I can't highlight some of the parts of the story that I really thought were clever, and some of the angles, the shots, maybe some of the fight scenes. They're very gripping tales. I mean, there's good violence in there. I mean, there's even a pistol in the first one. There's a guy with a revolver. So it must have been like he had a revolver, so it was like the 1800s. But I can't recommend them enough. And the Seven Samurai as well. And there's another one I watched that was actually made before Seven Samurai, as well as before Yojimbo and Sanjuro. It's called Ikiru, Ikiru. It's literally about a bureaucrat in post-war Japan in the early 50s. And, they're all... they took bureaucracy to a whole nother level, where you just couldn't get anything done. They would give you the runaround, and it's kind of funny because there's a narrator, and he ends up finding out that he has cancer, and the whole movie is him struggling with this and he's only got a couple months left to live and trying to figure out how he can live these few months and get enjoyment and do something worthwhile. And the guy who plays the main character, the protagonist, he's in all three of the other movies. And that was an excellent one too. It wasn't a violent movie. It was strictly, it was about, the meaning of life and living it and the point of life. And, it was very much so, there's a lot going on there. It's a very sophisticated movie when it comes to the point. But these the other three, or at least the other two, they're very much so period pieces. But like I said, they're very akin to early Tarantino flicks, in my opinion. They're very much so like old westerns, but with katanas. And the music is amazing. It's amazing. It's all bongos and Japanese instruments. It's fantastic. It's absolutely amazing. Both movies, as well as Seven Samurai, they all had awesome, way just different styles of music you'd never hear in a movie, like ambient music and stuff. There's another one too that I watched this weekend called Rashomon, Rashomon, and it was remade with Paul Newman and it was called The Outrage. Paul Newman and Edward G. Robinson and William the old Shat man, William Shatner, when he was young. And the one with Paul Newman, it was awesome. But the original Rashomon has the same guy who plays the protagonist in the other movies. He plays a thief in this one, and it's a very cool movie about because there's a murder happens, and this village the whoever the magistrate is trying to figure out who killed him, whether if it was this bandit, the samurai's wife, or they have four different tellings of the story. So it's kind of a movie critiquing truth and point of view, and how everybody's their point of view is different. They're going to see the truth differently. They're going to see events unfold differently. And there was four different stories. One of them was from the thief that did the killing. One of them was from the guy's wife who said that, she had a different story. And then there was a medium, a woman that summoned the spirit of the dead samurai, and the dead samurai spoke through the medium. And then there was a woodcutter that walked upon the man dead, and the whole movie is him retelling all this stuff. There's a priest, him and a priest are in this temple and it's raining, and some random commoner walks up and he's like, "What are you guys so down for?" And he ends up going through these. They're like, "We just can't understand. What the heck? What was going on there? And so they retell the story, and the commoner kind of he's in our position where he's hearing this for the first time, and he kind of pieces it together. But anyway, those Akira Kurosawa movies, they're very much so cult movies. I know that they were very popular in the 80s. I know George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola, they funded one of his movies, or they actually paid for it. But they're very much so. I think one of them won an Oscar for the foreign film of the year. But these movies are of the caliber. They're in the top 20 greatest movies of all time. At least one of them is, for sure. They're considered some of the greatest masterpieces. He's Akira Kurosawa. He's almost like Stanley Kubrick or John Ford. But at the same time, he's almost like a Leonardo da Vinci, or no, more like a Michelangelo. I mean, he's just so good at it. It's true art, and it's done in not an artsy fartsy, lame, boring way. A really gripping and well told tale. Anyway, I really enjoyed these movies, and I thought that. I'm a movie lover. I've got I think about 600 movies that I watch, and I'm always adding more. And I'm gonna start doing videos about them. I've been trying to do videos showcasing clips of the movie, but I just can't get the damn things through the copyright. So I might just start doing reviews or recommendations. And if you guys have any recommendations, please, I'm all ears. Like I said, I have 600 movies. I love movies. They are my nom de plume. It's one of my favorite pastimes is watching classic movies. I've been watching them since I was a kid. But anyway, if any of you guys have seen these movies, any of them, let me know what you thought. If you guys thought similar things. And if you get an opportunity, you got to see these movies, guys. They are just so good. So good. And actually, I seen there's a scene in one of them where one of like the inn owner or the restaurant owner is smoking one of those Japanese tobacco pipes where they put that little teeny bit of tobacco in the pipe and they just smoke. It's super high nicotine content. Anyway, second video for today, and I just thought I'd do something different, a little bit more light, something in the entertainment realm. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed hearing what I had to say and my opinion about these movies. But until next time, y'all have a good one. I hope y'all had a good weekend, and let me know what you think, gentlemen.